Hey, pilot, welcome to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. It's a solo show today, and it's getting cold outside. It all started as a spark. Maybe it was the sound of jets racing across the sky, or the feeling of your heart racing as you watch a crop duster flying low and slow. Even then, you knew you were meant to fly. For pilots, it's more than just a job. It's a calling. The early mornings, the long hours, the relentless training, you didn't do it for the money. You did it for that moment. That moment when the wheels lift off and the earth falls away beneath you. But flying is just the beginning. The journey to your dream job takes more than just skill in the sky. It takes strategy on the ground and a lifetime of learning.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. Learn how to go from good to great, from flight school to regional to major, and from hopeful to hired. Whether you're sharpening your skills, building your resume, or preparing for that big interview, this is where pilots come to level up. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
I have had a great couple weeks of flying as 2025 came to a close and rolled into 2026. And I have had 3 podcast listeners in a row that listened to the show. And I had a Spitfire Elite interview consulting first officer in the right seat. And I even had an older lady ask me if I was the guy from YouTube, which is a first for me because most everybody that comes up to say hi, they're a podcast listener, and they're usually a pilot that is trying to get going and doing their thing, and they're usually between in the 20s, 30s, or 40s. That was very fun having somebody that just watches for funsies. So hi, if you're there, if you're listening, it is great to meet you. Yeah, flying has been really great recently. I have really enjoyed it, but God, it is getting cold outside. And I decided that it is time to do a show about cold weather flying. And so the reason is because I have flown couple times in Detroit and a couple times in Minneapolis, and God bless y'all that live up there. It is so dang cold. And I've had so many adventures with cold weather flying that just kind of started so quick. It got me thinking about what we do and how we do it. And I don't think we talk about cold weather flying enough. And so that's what we're going to do today. Cold weather flying. I am not a god at cold weather flying. I'm not a pro, but it's going to be a list of a bunch of things that I think about, and it's not an all-inclusive list by any stretch of the imagination. But I have been thinking about it more and more and more, and so I reached out to a few people, and I want to give a shout out to my mentor Michael Phillips, to my buddy TJ Boone, and my friend Tim, who's a Czech airman at a major airline, who helped me out creating this list of things that I think we should talk about today. And so, yeah, shout out to them. First things first, though, if you are going to be doing some cold weather flying, you need to understand the limitations of the aircraft that you're flying. And you need to have your own personal minimums in mind as you do this, because it's so easy to try to push the envelope when you see other people doing it. And what do I mean by personal minimums? That's what you're willing to accept and what I'm willing and unwilling to accept. And if you find yourself trying to negotiate in your head, then you're probably going beyond your comfort zone. And that's not where you want to be. You also need to be really detailed with your pre-flight planning. If you're going to be flying into a place or around an area that has the potential for icing, it's not something you can just hope for the best for. You have to make sure that you're checking all the airmets, all the sigmets. You need to look at the winds aloft. Take a look if this is the time of year when you get some mountain wave turbulence as well, if you live over by the Rockies. When you look at your route, I want you to think, if you encounter icing, like, what's your exit plan? How are you going to get out of that? You need to make sure that you're super clear on the forecast, and make sure that you double check any alternates, what their weather is looking like, what it's forecasted to be, because there's a huge difference if you're flying a 152 or 787 or 757 like me. You need to know your aircraft's capabilities. Next, if you're lucky, you keep your aircraft in a nice cozy hangar that keeps the thing buttoned up and safe and lovely. But for your average Joe flying general aviation, um, having your airplane de-iced, that's going to be a super cost prohibitive thing. So if you're really worried about ice on your flight controls and surfaces and your wings and tail, all those things, like, they make blankets for them that you can wrap your aircraft in. Try to keep that ice and frost from forming on those surfaces. But the downside is, like, those are super cumbersome. And the best option is, if you're staying a day or two and you want to leave it outside for the first night, make sure that you can find a heated hangar. You might have to have the FBO tow your bird into the hangar and keep it there overnight before you leave, so it can stay warm and can stay contaminant free. And a $100 hangar fee is way cheaper than having somebody spray down your plane. So something to think about. Let's say you're made of money and you're going to pay for de-icing. So now it's time to think about how clean your aircraft needs to be, because your wings and your fuselage, having that clear of any kind of ice buildup or snow or precip, any of it, is really important. We all utilize the clean aircraft concept, and that is an aviation safety rule that mandates that an aircraft's wings and control surfaces, any other critical parts, they've got to be completely free of frost and snow and ice and any of that before takeoff. And the reason is because having those contaminants on your aircraft, they change the lift capabilities. It reduces it. It increases drag. It leads to really dangerous performance loss, and it can come to bite you fast. And it's up to the aircraft commander, the PIC, to determine that the aircraft is clean. And so you have to be thinking about that. And if there's active precipitation, you want to understand the different types and what degrees of the precipitation accumulates, and what's your aircraft's ability to perform in that kind of precip. It's really important. There's a big difference between frost and light snow and heavy snow and ice pellets and freezing rain and all the other types of precipitation there are, and that will affect your aircraft differently. So if you've got snow, you got frost, or you've got ice on your aircraft, it's got to be removed. It's got to come off. But not all airfields are affected by cold weather, and not all airfields will have a de-ice truck. One day I was in León, Mexico, when I was at the regional, and we had frost on our wings, and we needed to de-ice, but there was no de-ice truck. So do you know what they did? They pushed us back into the sun, and we sat in the sunlight for like 45 minutes while that frost melted off. And once it was clean and clear, then we left, and we took a 45-minute delay just for that. It's important to familiarize yourself with the process for getting sprayed down if you're going to, because each place does it differently. For me, like, I fly in major airports, and there are dedicated Iceman frequencies. We have all these publications that dictate an entire script on how you do this dance. And there's a lot to it. So if you're going to go do that and you are flying in a place where you're going to get sprayed down, just make sure that you are following all the steps and that you have the proper communication, because if you miss something, they're going to miss something, because they are not pilots, and they're just there standing in the cold, spraying the aircraft down. Now, we in the 121 world, we've got two different types of applications. The first is a de-ice, which is a fluid. You guys probably already know this, but I feel like I probably need to go through it. The de-ice fluid is especially designed to melt any accumulation that's currently on the aircraft. And then we put on anti-ice protection, and that's going to protect the aircraft from precip buildup over a certain period of time. And the period of time is called a holdover time. And each anti-ice fluid is different, and they've got different holdover times. They're made of different chemicals. But once that time expires, you have to go back to the truck, and you got to do the whole dance again, and you got to get sprayed again. And it is vitally important that you know the difference to make sure that that they do the de-ice first and the anti-ice second. I've seen an aircraft that was inadvertently sprayed with anti-ice instead of de-ice, and it didn't melt the buildup. And that is a super duper scary situation. So you need to know that. You need to know your holdover times. And if you once your little alarm rings, I literally use my iPad. I'm like, hey, set a timer for an hour and 45 minutes. And once that beeps and it hits, I got to go back. I'm not going to push it. All right. So that's type 1 and type 4, de-ice and anti-ice. Hey, pilot. Did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and you're going to move your family across the country? Did you decide to finally stop commuting and move in base? Or maybe you decided it's just time to look for a second home? Well, before you do, listen to this. Trident Home Loans is an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay, they understand union contracts, they understand the military, and they have the best VA loan rates in the nation. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. Heck, they've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization, and I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, get a mortgage quote anywhere. Then reach out to Marty and his team. They'll walk you through the process, show you how competitive their rates really are. So go right now to TridentHomeLoans.com and check them out. Tell them Nick sent you. All right, so let's get off the ground. Obviously, in a general aviation aircraft, you want to try to avoid icing conditions. And sometimes TKS or other known ice capable airplanes, they can't keep up. So if you have a TKS system, it has to be maintained properly. It's one of those special systems that provides some de-ice capability, some fluid that leaks out of the aircraft and gets things going. I'm not going to go into that because I don't know everything about it. But if you have a TKS system, you know about it, and you need to make sure that it's maintained. And some of them, they require monthly operations, sometimes other specified times, but you've got to make sure that it keeps functioning properly. You got to keep all the boots in working order. And if in doubt, when you're flying where there is known ice, you have to turn around. You have to go up, you have to go down, you have to go backwards, whatever it is, try to stay clear of an icing situation. And it's critical because engine operation can be severely affected. And so on the ground, when you're flying, if you have a cold soaked engine and it's below freezing and you try to start the engine, you can cause some serious damage to it. And it has nothing to do with the oil viscosity, like high or low viscosity or all that. There are multi-viscous oils, and it has everything to do with the fact that in an engine, there are dissimilar metals, and they freeze and shrink and expand at different rates. So if you have steel components matched up with aluminum components and they expand or they contract at these different rates, when you're below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to really make sure that the aircraft is preheated, that the engine is preheated, and before you try to start it, you just have to make sure that everything is ready to go. Be very careful on that because shelling an engine is a really expensive endeavor. So if you can't heat the engine properly, you need to get that thing in a hangar, get it in a heated hangar, and try to get it warmed up. And that's super important. Once it's out of the hangar, try to start it pretty quickly. That way it can start warming up and getting things moving. It's you can wear out piston rings super quick. You can score cylinder walls. You can spin bearings on a crankshaft, and all these things are just big problems. Cold starts are way harder on engines than hundreds of hours of operation once you get that thing started. So make sure it's super duper warm before you get that thing above 1,000 RPMs. It's my PSA to you guys to make sure that you are thinking about that before you start up that airplane. Do a really good pre-flight anytime that there's a possibility for frozen moisture. We talked about this a little bit, but it's true on every single airplane. And I like when I go and it's cold outside, I always go check my wings. I have to actually walk down the cabin and look out the windows because the wings are so high. I can go out on the jet bridge and see one wing, but because one wing's clean doesn't mean the other wing's clean. You got to look at everything. Um, Little airplanes, like if you're flying something small and you've got just a bit of frost on there, man, like it could require a ton of power. Your CG is very critical, and so make sure that you're doing a proper pre-flight. Make sure all your flight control surfaces are clear, and that you don't have any frozen trim tab actuators or control cables or any of that stuff. All right, that's just so vitally important before you go. A lot of times during the winter, little airplanes, people will use cabin heat, and the cabin heat is essentially like a tube that around the exhaust pipe that comes out, and it's worth your weight in gold to have a really good carbon monoxide tester and detector because there are cheap plastic ones with a color indicator, but you need a really high quality parts per million indicator with an alarm on it, because the worst thing that could happen is you start filling up your cabin with carbon monoxide. It can save your life. So don't be cheap on that and don't sleep on it. That's so important. All right, let's talk about landing and taxiing. Um, if you have no anti-skid on your plane, it can lock your brakes easily when you're trying to land on a contaminated runway, and that is very scary. If you're landing on a suspect surface or with reported less than good braking, make sure you stay off your brakes. Use the aircraft to try to slow itself down. Try to stay off those brakes as much as possible, and make sure you have a long enough runway to land when it is slippery outside. I think it's good practice in your plane to come up to come to a complete stop on a runway before you taxi off. I do this when I'm landing on a contaminated runway in a 7.5 or a 7.6. Like I will stop that thing and I will taxi slow. I will take slow turns and be really cautious with it. Even if they're trying, like, hey, I need you to expedite the exit. There are so many scenarios that you see on the news every single year of some plane sliding into the grass. And man, I don't want that to happen to me. A lot of times a plowed runway is really great, but the turnoff can get iced over, and it's used less often. And because it's used less often, it can be really sketch. Read your airport NOTAMs and make sure that they give you the FICON braking action report. FICON stands for field conditions, and they typically see they'll say like, hey, it's 555 or it's 444 or 333 or something like that, and there's a time associated with it. So what is that time? Was it just a few minutes ago? Was it 3 hours ago? That time is very important, and understanding things can get worse, and just especially when the sun goes down, it gets colder, things freeze up. It should make your spidey senses tingle if you have more than an hour old FICON report, and it's really important. The other day, I landed in Detroit. They were calling 333, and that's not a comfortable thing to do. In my pubs, there's a chart that shows braking action along with crosswind components, because that has a big effect on what the aircraft does as well. And so you've got to make sure that you put all those odds in your favor for success. And if you do that, you will have a more likely opportunity to not screw it up. That's really what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to make sure that we land properly and that we keep three wheels on the ground and that they're on the concrete and not in the grass. I want you to realize that when you do have crosswinds and you do have a braking action code, like that's really vital, because a strong crosswind will make your braking less effective, and the those charts are so important. Realize this as well: if you are landing the first half of the runway is usually pretty consistent, but a lot less people usually don't use the end of the runway. So if you end up going down to that last third of the runway, it can be super duper slippery and could be very dangerous. So just put that in the back of your mind, right? If you're a larger airplane and you're flying in maybe a part 135 or a 91, or you're flying some kind of jet or something, a lot of times your FMS will give you a landing distance prediction based on your weight and all sorts of other parameters like winds and temperature and elevation and contaminant levels, any MELs you might have, all sorts of different things. So fill that thing out, get a landing progress report. I have the benefit in my plane is we have 4 wheels with 4 sets of brakes on each main mount. And so and we have anti-skid, and that, I mean, the 7.5, boy, golly, like that thing can stop in 4,000 something feet. It is wild how crazy short. But if you're in something big like a Airbus 321, which is, not huge, but it's only got 2 wheels, 2 sets of brakes, and it has a longer landing distance. So know what you're flying, know what the landing distances are, and consider all of those things, because when you do, you've got to make sure that you land right there in the first 1,000 feet and get the aircraft on the ground and do the majority of your stopping as efficiently as you can. I try to use full reversers. Those reversers are great because the more they compensate for the auto brakes, which we also have. When those reversers are activated, they will slow the aircraft without using the brake pedals, and that will be less slippery. And so I'm always thinking like hydraulic braking to help slow the plane, but also like as much reverse thrust as I can to get that thing stopped and get it and manage that aircraft appropriately. It's much easier to keep things straight down the runway if you're using less brakes. And so if you're in a really contaminated environment, make damn well sure that your aircraft's under control before you try to turn off. We talked a little bit about getting into like sliding into the grass. It is really sketch, and get creative when you're doing it, because it's better to stop the aircraft and get it clearly off of the runway instead of like going into the grass and all of a sudden having to make some like ridiculous PA to your people and try to do some song and dance while you're waiting on some buses to come take you out and taxi and bring you back because you went off into the grass. So that's what I've got to say about that. Once you're clear of the runway, you got to make it to wherever you're going to park. And so I want you to think about super duper slow taxiing. It's really important to make sure that if you start to slip, you stop the aircraft. When I'm taxiing around, I've got my actual hands on the reversers so that I can deploy them if my brakes stop working. If it's actively snowing, there's a chance that the snow can cover the taxi line. If you've got no visual reference, if you don't see a taxi line, stop the plane, set the brake, call for help. Don't get pressured into doing something stupid. It happened to me last year. I was at an airport and we were going to the de-ice pits, and it was so snowy that I couldn't see probably 200, 300 feet of the taxi line. It was totally gone. And so I stopped, I set the brake, and I called the ground control. I'm like, hey, I can't see the taxi line. And so they sent a plow over to me to clear it, but we had to wait like 10 minutes. And I'm so glad that I did, because I would much rather just wait than make a mistake and clip a wing or slide off, man. So there's a lot to think about, and this is by no means like a complete list. And I don't want to be rambling on, but I think that I want to recap with a couple highlights. Number one, your pre-flight planning is vital. Make sure you're doing it. Make sure you're focused on where you're going and how you're going to get there and all of the what ifs. Remember the clean aircraft concept. Make sure that plane is clear. If you're flying and icing and you get nervous, you need to turn around, you need to exit the icing. And number four, I want you to go slow and steady. Slow and steady wins the race when you're maneuvering on the ground. Spend the time to get smart on your company's cold weather operations. Do the things that you need to do to make yourself knowledgeable about it, because your knowledge can save your career, and it can save your life, and it can save your passenger's life. So yeah, that's it. So again, thanks to my buddy Tim, Michael, TJ. You guys are amazing for helping me wrap my head around this and figure out what to talk about. And I know you guys are going to do it. It's going to be super awesome. So good luck. Get that flying done and do it smart. All right. We'll see you on Monday. All right, pilots, that's the episode. I hope you've really enjoyed it. But before you go, do me a quick favor, subscribe to my show and leave me a review. Give me a 1-star review if it was totally worthless. Give me a 5-star review if it was the most amazing thing you've ever heard. I want to hear from you. So if you can give me a review, subscribe to the podcast, make yourself a little bit better, I will be happy. You'll be happy. We'll keep crushing. I cannot wait to see you on the next episode.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not constitute professional advice. The producers and sponsors make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of the content.